did a study, a very simple study, where they got people to sit in front of a computer screen and watch images and then try to recall as many of the images as they could. They're just random images of a cat, a star, a cup of coffee. And then they took people and put their hands in a bucket of ice and had them do the same thing, and the people with their hands in the bucket of ice could remember better than they could before. And the reason is because the bucket of ice causes the adrenal gland to release cortisol. The cortisol is thought to fortify the memory. So that's one of the reasons why people, when they go through traumatic events, often have very distinct and troubling memories of things that happened to them, and then have no memory of other things going on at the same time. What the body does is, when the body's responding to trauma, is it becomes vigilant. The most common symptom in my practice when I meet people is they have a huge charge of anxious energy. I rarely get referrals for people who are overly mellow, like he's just like a hippie from the 60s. He's really just so mellow, never gets upset. We need some help getting him upset more often, Usually people are really, really anxious. And one of the reasons is because they've gone through trauma, and the body's normal response to that is to become what's called hypervigilant, always worried about the other shoe dropping. A summer or so ago, I was clearing brush from the back of our property, and I disrupted a little house of an adolescent rattlesnake. He's out there in those bushes hunting for things, and I'm moving his hunting grounds right out from underneath him, and he was pretty pissed off, shaking his tail at me. And I'm not real fond of snakes myself. I never have been, but I know they are really valuable animals. I love them, but I want them to be some distance away, especially one that can bite me and cause muscle damage and all those things. And I was also worried about my dog, who might not understand how dangerous this little critter can be. And a bite from this critter probably won't kill me, but it probably would kill him. So I didn't want to kill him, but I didn't want to handle them either. So I hired these people who, their business is to come get critters like that off your property. They won't kill them, they promise, but they get them off your property. And these guys, they came out and they thought I was, going to call about a black snake or something. Often people call from black snakes, say, I have a dangerous snake on my property, and a black snake is the nicest animal on the planet. They're really wonderful to have. I love having them around. They eat mice and things. They're harmless to humans. But they came out and saw it was a rattlesnake, and they were thrilled, like, oh, yay, a rattlesnake. And they got him from underneath my house and brought him away. To give you some idea of how irrational my fear was, I stayed up on our deck while they were down on the ground, because I was pretty sure that if this rattlesnake stopped me, he's going to go, you're the guy who called these people on me, and I'm getting you, right? And I know that sounds silly, and I thought it was silly. I thought, David, this is ridiculous. These people know what they're doing. You can be down there. It's not going to come after you directly, I still got on the steps. It's like, well, what if this is the first rattlesnake ever to have developed a prefrontal cortex? And, it could happen. So I stayed up there and watched from afar. But what's really interesting to me now is that anytime I walk on the right-hand side of my house, I become hypervigilant about a snake. I'm like looking everywhere. I walk on the left-hand side of my house, or the back of my house, or the front of my house, and I don't even pay attention. But I walk in that place where that rattlesnake last was, and I go into hyper alert. And what it is, it's my body is programmed to do that because it could have been dangerous once, and I got to be on alert the next time. Cortisol was undoubtedly released through my adrenal gland, which fortified the memory of it on the right-hand side of the house. You can understand why that might be. But a fundamental problem for people when they're over anxious is that they have a hard time getting sleep, they have a hard time problem solving, and if already you've experienced insult to your brain because of an injury or because of an accident or something, then it don't help at all. But understanding that the single most effective treatment for people that have post-traumatic stress disorder, also, by the way, the single most effective treatment for people who have minor and major depression and other anxiety disorders, PTSD is considered an anxiety disorder, is aerobic activity, moving. What you want to do, if you want to help people, the single most effective thing you can do to help them is get them move, aerobically move. Because it turns out that what that does is it dampens down this excess arousal. That helps people to get better night's sleep, makes it more likely that they'll stay in their thinking brain. Because one of the things, among many things that happens when we don't sleep, is we're more likely to interpret things as threat. So often people have a lot of sleep problems, and when we lack sleep, we're more likely to interpret things as threat. A study was done about this too, where they got some 20-ish aged people, figured out how they slept, what their normal sleep pattern looked like, And then they broke them into two groups, and they had one group stay up for 35 straight hours, and they had the other group just sleep normally. Then they sat them down to watch a scary movie, and they used that magnetic resonance imaging machine. And the students who had slept normally ran it all through their prefrontal cortex. You could see it lighting up, connected with other parts of the frontal lobe lighting up. And they said things out loud like, you know, they were watching Saw 4 or something, and they were saying, oh, they did that in Saw 3, that's special effects, I knew that was going to happen, gee, how predictable can that be? But the young people who had not slept ran it immediately through their limbic system. You could see the prefrontal cortex shut down, you see the brain light up in all the ways we know it lights up. They were checking their respiration, their skin temperature, their heart rate, all those things, everything just went in overdrive. They would do studies with cortisol levels. Their cortisol levels were through the roof, you know, samples of cortisol. And the reason it's thought that this happens is because when the brain is in doubt, the brain assumes threat. Imagine our ancestors who don't understand the physical world around them very well, the dynamics of it, wandering around, you know, on a savanna somewhere, and a big storm comes. And they got to get out of the storm, so they go in a cave, and the storm is like all hell is breaking out. There's thunder and lightning, and they don't know why the dynamics of, you know, the storm system. So they think the gods must be angry at them, and they don't sleep well that night. But eventually the storm passes, and a high replaces it, and they're all wandering around that next day with that kind of sleepy feeling, you know, looking around like, oh gosh, where am I? You know that feeling when you haven't had sleep, you feel kind of out of your body. And now imagine something rustles in the grass, and they look over there and they go, oh, what is that? Is that the wind or is that a lion? Well, what the brain says is, when in doubt, assume lion. Right? If you run a couple hundred yards and it turns out that it's, you know, the wind, no big deal. You'll be more tired, but no big deal. On the other hand, if you're assuming it's something that doesn't threaten you, like the wind, and it is a lion, you cease to exist. So when in doubt, our bodies are programmed, our body-brain complex is programmed to assume threat. This is one of the reasons why people who have gone through injury, or people that have got PTSD, or a combination of both, when they're not sleeping well, it puts them in even increased jeopardy. The bottom line is they start assuming threat is in places where threat isn't. And their limbic system just keeps firing away, making it harder to sleep, etc. And one of the reasons why, if you're supporting people, helping them get a good night's sleep is among the most important things to do. You got to settle down that arousal system. But I work with people sometimes who, you know, they have staff coming in and out of their life on a regular basis, and the agency is just happy, can we get someone to be with you at night? That's probably the most important time of the day, to get the right person, the right match with people, so they can settle down and get a good night's sleep. But it's pretty hard to fall asleep when you don't trust who's in your house. It's pretty hard to fall asleep when someone down the hall is screaming all night. It's hard, you know, finding good sleep is really critical. You want to help someone. I say there's no schedule or time more important if they need support 24/7 than that one overnight. Good night's rest do people a world of good. One more thing about people who sustained head injuries of one sort or another. At least one researcher, a woman named M.V. Morton from Montana, believes that one of the things that happens why people are in such distress is not just that there's insult to the brain and perhaps trouble processing information from one region to the other, one hemisphere or the other of the brain, damage to the frontal lobes, whatever it might be, but because one of the things that commonly happens to people who sustain a brain injury is their social network drops off the face of the earth. I don't know what the data is these days, but I remember it used to be something like from 17 to 25 years was the age of people, most people that had head injuries, and the vast majority of them were young men. And think about it, sometimes a young man who's partying and has a big social network, they sustain a brain injury, and then that network just disappears. People aren't sure how to be with you anymore, and it disappears. And M.V. Morton believes that that's a big part of what people's distress about is the breakdown in that social network.